So the last time I talked about weapons training, I pissed off the entirety of the Filipino martial arts and neckbeard community. And I felt kind of bad about that. Not because I think I did anything wrong, but because I didn't do it enough. So today, we're gonna do it all over again. Now on a serious note, I'm not really gonna try to piss anyone off with this, but I do seem to be pretty good at that. And if I do, please be sure to subscribe. All that being said, I am by no means suggesting that I'm a weapons handling expert. However, I do teach a realistic, practical self-defense system, and weapons are a real thing you might have to deal with. So to that end, yes, I say we know how to use weapons, but we don't train weapons to learn how to knife fight. We use weapons as a means to an end, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that later on. But for right now, I want to talk about how we move when we hold our weapon. Because we spend most of our time training with our hands and our feet, I think the way we move should be similar to the way we do when we're using our hands and our feet. So we do what's called weaponized boxing, which is a term I took from Dax Cordero over at the Weaponized Boxing forum on Facebook, but I don't think he's trademarked that term, so I'm free to take it. When I'm empty-handed, I keep my hands up nice and high, I'm light on my feet, I use my jab to measure distance, use my rear hand to land power. And the only thing that changes is which hand becomes your primary hand. I personally like having my weapon in the backhand, which means rather than throwing a cross, rear hook, uppercut, overhand, I still throw a cross, but now my hook focuses more on cutting. My overhand focuses more on cutting. My uppercut is literally an uppercut. If I go for the lead hand holding, I still have my jab, although I'll usually go for more of a backhand type thing. I have my lead overhand, lead hook, and again, lead uppercut. The only thing that's different about going empty-handed to loaded hand is what you're focusing on striking with. When I'm empty-handed, all of my weapons are pretty much equally valuable. But when I load my hands, this becomes my primary weapon. But I want to keep my training as simple and universal as possible. So the way I move when I'm boxing is the same way I'm gonna move with my loaded weapons. But there are some differences because now you have a bunch of different strikes and cuts open to you. So in the combative system, we hold the weapon two different ways. We have what's called the aggressive forehand grip and the defensive reverse grip. For right now, we're gonna talk about the aggressive forehand grip. Because as I've said in a previous video, the best way to learn to defend yourself from something is to first learn how to attack with that thing. So if I'm holding my knife like this, I'm communicating A, that this is in fact a knife, and I'll talk about why that distinction is important later. Right now, we're gonna go over the different angles we use in this system, and they're universal no matter which way you're holding the thing, but there's a few different intents here. Angle number one is a straight downward cut. I'm going from 12 to 6, cutting straight down at my opponent. Angle number two is a diagonal going down. Angle number three is a mirror diagonal. Angle number four is coming up at a diagonal. Angle 5 is another diagonal. So we go straight down, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then from here we have angle 6, which is now a stab. I'm gonna take this angle here, poke straight at my opponent, reverse the grip, same thing here. And then angle number 8 is now the sewing machine stab. So seeing them on the bag, we have angle 1 going straight down, angle 2 coming across, angle 3 coming across, angle 4 coming up, angle 5 coming up, stab 1, stab 2, and stab 3. Earlier I mentioned that an aggressive grip specifies that this is in fact a knife. A defensive grip does not communicate that, because a defensive grip doesn't mean you only have a knife in your hand. This could equally be a tactical pen, a regular pen, a flashlight, keys, whatever. You need to think not that you're learning how to fight with a knife, but you're learning to fight with anything that is about this long, shorter, or a little bit longer. So as for me personally, I usually carry this thing in my pocket all the time. My flashlight is my everyday carry. I'm more likely to use this in an altercation than I am this. But the same way I use the knife is how I'm gonna use the flashlight, which is why I say we're using defensive grip, not defensive knife grip. But that's a small detail, just something to keep in mind. Our defensive angles are more or less the same. We still have number 1 going down, 2 across, 3 across, 4 up, 5 up. But now instead of focusing on stabs, because we're assuming again, we have some kind of blunt object in our hand, we're now gonna turn into a punch. Now, some people will argue that if you load up your hand and punch like this, your fingers will crash into it and you'll break them. I don't necessarily agree with that, mostly because I've punched thousands of hundreds of times with something in my hand and I've never broken my hand, but whatever. If that's happened to you, I'm sorry. But again, our defensive angles are assuming we have something in our hand. The important piece is that you know your weapon. Whatever it is, whatever you choose to carry or happen to pick up, you need to know what it is and use it appropriately. So I'm here moving, maybe I throw my jab, Maybe I throw some downward hammer fists, and yes, these are essentially just different hammer fist angles. I'm still throwing combinations, still keeping distance, but when I want to, boom, there come my stabs. So in our regular empty hand training, our first combination is the double jab cross. In other words, I'm throwing 2 straight with the lead, 1 straight with the rear. Not a lot changes in our weaponized boxing, but I'll instead go 2 jabs to an angle 1, or 2 jabs to an angle 2. But if I want to go a step up from that, as I get more advanced in my empty hand striking, I won't just stay here and throw my double jab cross. I'll start moving around. I'll start finding different angles to set up my rear hand strike. Same thing is true when I load up. The same way I move empty-handed is how I'm gonna move loaded-handed. And this is what I've seen helps people go from being awkward and magic wanding with the knife to now all of a sudden moving like they're very comfortable and they've been doing this for years. Keep the training as uniform as possible. If your system is mostly boxing or kickboxing focused, try to make your weapons training the same thing, but pay respect to what you're putting in your hand. If it's a knife, remember that you have now a bladed edge to it. If it's an impact weapon, treat it like an impact weapon, that's on you. But same token, if your self-defense system is mostly grappling based, just remember now, your grappling needs to focus on utilizing the weapon. And this is a good time to talk about how I teach wrestling by using knives. So earlier I was talking about utilizing weapons as a means to an end, and this is what I mean. The moment you put a weapon in someone's hand and you tell their partner or their opponent, do not let that thing touch you, they understand immediately how to do a 2-on-1, how to do a Russian tie, how to do arm drags, even how to go for chokes and takedowns. It becomes an intuitive thing because even though they know this is just a toy, once they get it in their mind that it's a metaphor for a real thing, they understand the consequences of failing. So now I can teach them important wrestling and clinching concepts without worrying about them just goofing off or toning out entirely. And this is just talking about me only having training knives like this. If you get shock knives, it's an entirely different kind of world. And yes, there are some specific things that weapons training demands, as in it's not a one-for-one transfer from empty hand to loaded hand. But if you want to learn broadly the concepts of clinching and wrestling, then I think loaded weapon training is the best way to do that, because it communicates a lot while doing very little. Once I put this in my hand, the student understands the consequences for failing can be drastic, sometimes life-threatening. Again, in training, it's more metaphorical life-threatening, but again, you have to communicate that with your students. And also, when I put this in someone's hand, they instinctively want to use it, and this becomes the only thing they're going to threaten with. Yes, a minute ago I went into the importance of using the forehand to set up the backhand, but for the most part, people are going to focus on using this. If you're trying to stab someone with the right hand, you're probably not going to remember that you have the left knee. So, if you're trying to teach a brand new beginner how to grapple, instead of having them worry about what happens if he grabs here and then grabs here and then starts going for a sweep, just worry about defending from the one attack. Then, as they get more comfortable with that, you can start introducing different variables. Weapons are a great way to introduce level 1 or even level 0 grappling to a complete beginner. And this is why, in my previous video with Ed from Metrolina Martial Arts, I managed to piss off the entire Filipino martial arts community. Because in my opinion, the greatest contribution of Filipino martial arts is not learning to hit someone with a stick, because that's not really a complicated process. Like my old instructor said, if you want to learn how to stick fight, pick up a stick. It's that simple. But the greatest contribution, I think, that things like Pekiti Tirsia have contributed to the martial arts is a rapid-fire way to learn how to grapple. Again, the consequences for failing are immediate and they can be dire. But learning how to manipulate someone's body weight, learning how to neutralize an arm, is so much simpler when the only thing they're trying to do is hit you with their right hand, or hit you with their left hand if they're a dirty southpaw. I don't think there's anything inherently bad about Filipino martial arts or even things like HEMA. But I do think people glorify what a stick and knife fight looks like. Because the truth is, there's no such thing as a knife fight. There's only a stabbing and the person getting stabbed. All that being said, you guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you learned something. If you did, please make sure to subscribe, tap the notification bell, like, share, and leave a comment. And if you want to support the channel, go ahead and open up the description box down there at the bottom. There you'll find a whole bunch of links and codes to pick up some of the best apparel and training gear on the planet, courtesy of Combat Corner. As always, you guys, this has been Rob in Combat Self-Defense. I want to thank you for all the hard work. Thank you for the hard work yet to be done, and I'll see you next time. I can't wait to see how mad all the LARPers get at me.